Welcome to a Wednesday edition of From the Nosebleeds. I'm Joey Gunnar, joined by Richie Carni, and today we're going to be talking about a very similar topic to what we were talking about last week, and that's the word trap game. You know, we talked last week about trap games going into this matchup against the Jets overseas. What do the Broncos need to do to avoid a trap game? And I feel like we can have a very similar conversation this week, except with a little bit more of a heightened element to it, because the Giants look like a better team, at least in the most recent weeks, than the Jets. They look much better. They look, like a real team. We've seen them do some crazy things, and those crazy things are beating the Chargers and beating the Eagles. But then they go out and they lose to the Saints. This is a frisky team. That's the best word I can use to describe what this Giants team is. And them matching up against the Broncos, it poses some defensive issues for the Broncos. We've seen this defense be great, but what do they need to do to stop this team from succeeding?
Well, it's two completely different teams when you look at the Giants that started the NFL season with Russell Wilson, and now the energy and the juice and the life that's been injected back into especially the offensive side of the ball. Because defensively, the New York Giants have some playmakers, especially on their defensive front.
Yeah.
But the tag team duo of Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterbo have kind of given this offense for the Giants a new identity. And that is why, to kind of answer your first question, Joey, I would say that I don't think the Denver Broncos are headed for another quote-unquote trap game. I didn't think they were going into a trap game against the Jets, and my main reasoning was I don't know that the Denver Broncos are good enough of an all-around team, offense, defense, special teams, to really be a team that can find themselves mentally slipping into a trap against like a team like the Bengals, who are going up against a backup quarterback, or the Jets. They've struggled. Defensively, they've been pretty amazing. They've had some bend but don't break moments early in the season. They've definitely turned it on as of late, especially from a blitz, sack, pressure perspective. But offensively, Joey, I don't know that this offense can or should go into any game saying, now we're going to rest on our heels a little bit here. We're going to coast through this. So I don't think this game against the New York Giants presents itself as a trap game for some of the same reasons that I felt against the Jets. That being said, I don't know that this is going to be an easy game for the Broncos. They're currently 7-point favorites, if I'm not mistaken, 7.5-point favorites. And I got to be honest, as much as I love the Denver Broncos, I grew up with them as my hometown team. I don't feel like I have, in the post-Payton Manning era, ever felt comfortable about the Broncos beating a team by more than a touchdown as any kind of lock.
Realistically, ever.
So I don't love that. I think the Broncos, certainly with their defense, which is a Super Bowl caliber defense, in my opinion, have an opportunity to beat almost any team in the NFL. I think going into Philly and beating the defending Super Bowl champion Eagles, who have plenty of issues in their own right, is proof of that. So I expect this to be a lower scoring, tight game. But this offense, if they show up the way they did in London at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, the Giants could win this game by more than a touchdown.
Well, they will. They will.
Yeah.
If they play like they did against the Jets in London, they will lose this game. They didn't play well outside of the first quarter at all. But one thing that you said is that they weren't a good enough offense to really clarify anything as a trap game. I disagree. They have all the talent on the offensive side of the ball. They're a really talented, offensively skilled football team, but they're inconsistent. They're as inconsistent as it gets. That doesn't mean that they're not good. It just means that they've got to click. That's the one thing holding them back.
They've played 6 games so far through this season, right?
Yeah.
6 times 4 is 24 quarters of football. In terms of the offense, Joey, how many really good quarters of football has this Denver Broncos offense played this season? You just ballpark it.
There's probably been 6 or 7.
Okay, so we're less than 2 full games out of 6 weeks have we seen this offense be really good or good.
But it's leading to them winning. It's still leading to them winning, no matter how good.
Because of the defense.
You can't take that away.
You can't
discredit how good of a team it is.
No. This is how it was in the Super Bowl year too. I'm saying it not necessarily as a massive slight, but an admission or an acknowledgement of that's the reality of the situation. They should have been 3-0 to start the season. And the reason why they lost those games was not because the defense ended up giving up a last drive that allowed them to get walked off by the Colts and the Chargers.
Was it because of the offense? I mean, we lost one game because of a leverage call. Was that on the offense?
No, that's special teams at that point.
Sure, there were some penalties that put them into some really bad positions in those two games that they lost off those field goals. But overall, the offense wasn't going out there and just, crapping the bed. They weren't doing nothing.
It comes in spurts, though, Joey. It's a quarter here, a half there, and then it's the complete opposite end of the coin. Bo Nix goes out and throws 3 touchdowns against the Colts, and then the offense goes cold the rest of the game.
Which is inconsistent. It doesn't mean that they're bad. It doesn't mean they're not good.
They can be good on paper and not good in principle. They can be good when you're looking at a depth chart and saying, wow, look at the talent that they have at running back, at wide receiver, at tight end, at quarterback, even the offensive line, if you want to grade it out that way. But if they're not going out there and living up to the expectation that the paper presents, that does diminish it a little bit, in my opinion. And I think they can be better. They need to be better, frankly. So I'm certainly not trying to sit here and say that the Broncos are left for dead. They're tied for first in the AFC West. They are currently, if the playoffs started today, a wild card team in the exact same spot that they were last postseason, just facing a different team.
Yeah. There are definitely things that they need to work on. I'm not disagreeing with you that I'm not here trying to say that they're the best offense in the league. They have the talent there. They just need to get it in rhythm. We've seen good quarters out of them, and that's just that. We've seen good quarters. I just said about 6 quarters have been great. But outside of that, not much. And that just proves to me that they're inconsistent. They're still working on connecting. Overall, they're still a pretty young team. Like, it's not like these guys are veterans. They've had one playoff game. A lot of them have seen the Bills, and that's it. That's all Bo Nix has seen in the postseason. So going up against a great team in the postseason, you end up losing. There is no benchmark of this is what it is to succeed. They have all the talent there. They have all the drive. They just need to start connecting and being consistent. And if they're not consistent up against the Giants this week, then they'll lose this game. They'll lose it. There's nothing telling me that they'll win this game if they go and play like they did against the Eagles for the first 3 quarters or like they did against the Jets for the last 3 quarters,
Yeah, well, they certainly could. Obviously, I mean, you can go out. Any team can go out in the NFL and lose. We just watched the Atlanta Falcons beat the Buffalo Bills as more than a touchdown underdog. The Bears, who were a significant dog, 5.5 or 6 points to the Washington Commanders, go ahead and beat them. Any team in the NFL can lose any week, but this next 5-game or so stretch for the Broncos is going to have a significant impact on the upward or downward trajectory of their season. If this is going to be a team that gets back to double-digit wins, that gets back into the postseason, which may require more than 10 wins this year, because you never know.
Well, with the way the AFC is looking.
Starting with this weekend against the Giants, which is going to be a big game, an emotional game. You get the retirement or the enshrinement of Demaryius Thomas into the Broncos Ring of Honor. So there's going to be a lot of Super Bowl 50 memories and emotions going into that game. And the Broncos offense has continually struggled to string positive drives together. They seem to start slow. That's been an epidemic during Sean Payton's tenure here with the Broncos. And then even if they get going, it just feels like you're waiting for that foot to come off the gas. And it's just 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. Or they stall and they settle for field goals, and it puts pressure on the defense, sometimes with disadvantageous field position because of special teams, to try to make up that gap. And 4 times out of 6, they have. But that is not going to be a recipe for success, even with a somewhat softer, more favorable schedule going forward to continue for Denver.
Yeah, no, they've definitely gone through the hard part of their schedule so far with the 3 games. You got lucky with the Bengals that Joe Burrow wasn't playing.
A lot of games on the road too. So
a lot of games on the road. They're back home for the first time in 2 weeks. The last game at home was Monday night against the Bengals. So it's been a while since they've been back at home. They can get in that feeling again. But the defense, they've got to show up against this tandem. You mentioned them earlier, Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterbo. They look like a mini Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley. They look amazing together. I mean, what they've done, they've completely revitalized this offense for New York. And, they've been dangerous, except for the game against the Saints. I mean, this is a strange team. They're very similar to the Broncos, that they're as inconsistent as us. But those 2 guys, if you can't stop them right away, if this defense can't go in there and force sacks on the rookie early and often, they'll fall into a really bad position where they're on their heels, and then the offense will go out there and have to make some plays. And we haven't been able to see them come back with a 1-2 punch when they're down. You know?
Even as good as this Broncos defense has been lauded, which is deserved, they have seemed to struggle at times against the run when you have a dynamic, athletic, and multifaceted running back, which Cam Scatterbo profiles as. He can catch the ball to the backfield. He can certainly ram it up the middle, and he's got the speed laterally to get out onto the edges. Plus, he's a tackle-breaking machine when it comes to
he's a wrecking ball,
physical contact. So Breece Hall of the Jets is the figurehead of the third best rushing attack in the NFL going into last week. They have seemed to struggle against really proficient running offenses. The Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts Eagles would be an exception in that category, where I actually feel like overall they defended it pretty well. But
they did compared to what Saquon could do.
Yes, exactly. When you talk about the ceiling of what both of those players could do, it was pretty good. They still were trailing by 14 points going into the fourth quarter of that game. But you are right. When you have a quarterback like Jackson Dart, who is kind of finding his footing at the NFL level, but brings athleticism and youth and energy to the position, and he is dynamic enough of a playmaker, and there's enough uncertainty around him because there's only a handful of games of tape on him thus far, that there's a little bit of a wild card factor there. And, you know what you're going to get in Cam Scatterbo. And, you mentioned the kind of dynamic duo that they're forming in New York. If the Broncos don't stop them, I would imagine that, a push-pull door sign or a childproof lock on a lid might, because those two, with the way that they run head first and forward, there is kind of a worry for me. I shouldn't say a worry, but an intrigue for me of how often can they take that kind of physical toll and that physical beating before it wears down on their bodies. Jackson Dart has spent time in the blue tent multiple times.
Yeah, last week, we saw Russell Wilson.
Cam Scatterbo, there's like specials running on ESPN about how he used to put pads on and run into telephone poles and bang his head into brick walls.
Yeah, you've seen the videos before games. His pre-games. He's banging his head. It's insane.
The Broncos have, especially with their defensive front, their interior, their pass rush, and then with the physicality of a Talanoa Hufanga and an Alex Singleton, they have the ability to go blow for blow with a rushing attack like the New York Giants have. But it's going to be about not in rounds 1 or rounds 2, but in the third quarter and in the fourth quarter, because that's what good running teams do. They wear you down and wear you down and wear you down until they can pop one late in the game and kind of put themselves in a position to run away with it. So for the Broncos defense, it's going to be about weathering the storm, that Rocky style fight where you've got to keep taking punches because they're going to run between the tackles. They've got Andrew Thomas lining up opposite of Nick Bonito. It's going to be a fantastic battle all game long. And the success or failure of the New York Giants to be able to control the line of scrimmage is going to determine whether or not they can keep up with a team like the Broncos, who are probably top to bottom more talented.
Yeah, the defensive side, at least. The defensive side of the ball for the Broncos is going to be what makes or breaks this game. But offensively, the Broncos have a good chance, just like they did last week against the Jets, to go and get some stats up. We're looking at the 6th worst pass defense in the league in the Giants, the 10th worst run defense in the league in the Giants. So those stats prove that they are not as talented as it may seem on paper on the defense. The Broncos need to capitalize now. I was saying this last week against the Jets. They need to have a game where their offense feels like the best offense in the world, just for the composure or the mental side of it. Getting Bo Nix out there, getting him some long completions, some short completions, just completions overall, and some good yardage. Getting him a game where he feels confident moving forward the rest of the season, that's what feels important to me right now. It sounds strange, but stats matter to some of these players, and I don't necessarily feel like they do to Bo Nix as much, but getting him a game where he feels like he can actually succeed against some of these good teams is important moving forward.
No, I don't disagree. There's obviously a cerebral component to the game of football, and whether you're talking about individually as a position, collectively as a group, like an offensive line or a running back room or wide receivers or whatever, or just as an entire offense/defense, there is something to proving to yourself that you can do it. You can cross the finish line. You can reach that milestone. You can accomplish whatever checklist or goal that you have. And I agree with you that I think that the importance of what you're talking about, to me, if I was to summarize it in one word, is this offense needs to find a rhythm. They need to be able to operate with some kind of consistency, play to play throughout a drive, and then drive to drive throughout a game, to be able to stack points and not feel like every time they go out there that it's scrambled and jumbled and they're having to kind of calm things down at the line of scrimmage every single play. And that leads into what we talked about yesterday, which I have been banging the table for, which is they have to simplify things. Sean Payton has to, and I don't even care if you have to say it this way because it comes across more harshly than intended, we have to dumb it down. I know Sean Payton is an offensive guru. He's had 2 decades of success at the NFL level. He is a Super Bowl winning head coach. And I don't really care that it happened almost 2 decades ago because it's pretty hard to do. And there's only a select list of coaches in NFL history who have reached that milestone. Sean Payton's one of them. And he's attempting to be the first coach to ever do it twice with 2 different teams. So I think that he gets too caught up and too proud in the system that has built his career. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But you have to be able to adapt. You have to be able to mold. And so I think for Sean Payton to resist that urge and the temptation to just lean into this intricate, convoluted positional grouping, swapping that he likes to do, which inherently does force the defense to have to make a lot of substitutions, keeps them on their toes. But it's having less of an effect on the defense than it is on the offense because they are unable most of the time. And you heard it from the words of Bo Nix, to find a rhythm, to establish themselves and get going in the same direction, play to play and series to series.
A rhythm and an identity is another word I'd use, because same kind of thing we've seen out in CU. They don't have an identity. What is the identity for the Broncos offense right now? We haven't really seen anything other than an inconsistent offensive squad.
I think that they haven't consistently stuck to it, but I think we have seen, and they've talked about what their identity is, and it's centered around offensively running the football with J.K. Dobbins. They should be, because of the defense that they have. When you have a defense that is as strong as the Denver Broncos present themselves, they're on pace to break the single season sack record as a team in 15 games.
Yeah.
We talked about, they get 17 games, so that's not really fair. They beat it in 16 on this pace. They'd beat it in 15 on this pace. They have the reigning defensive player of the year headlining a star-studded secondary that has a first-round pick from this past offseason that's barely even making noticeable plays on game day. That's how loaded they are with Jaquan McMillan, Riley Moss, and Patrick Surtain in that cornerback room. Then you add in Talanoa Hufanga at the safety position, and then maybe we'll get Dre Greenlaw back at some point this season. Maybe we won't. But the point is, when you have a defense that is as expensive and loaded and talented as this Broncos team has, your identity as an offense should be run the ball, control the clock, let our defense do what they do, and we just need to find a way to wear down the opposing defense to give them time to recharge and do it again. Because if they run the ball well, it sets up the play action, which opens up opportunity for the Broncos playmakers to make plays down the field. And that is the identity that has worked most successfully for them this season. We just haven't seen it enough.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a top 5 running offense, which being able to say that this year is very different than what we were saying about this running offense last year. I mean, it was terrible. And that's why you couldn't find much success, at least on the ground game, but very similar to what you were talking about. You couldn't wear offenses out or defenses out and give your defense time to recuperate and get back on the field. This year, the identity is the defense for the Broncos. When people are talking about the Broncos all around the league, they're not mentioning what Cortland Sutton's doing. They're not mentioning what Bo Nix is doing. They could mention the run game, how great it's been compared to last year, but even that doesn't compare to what this defense has been. So for the Broncos to find an offensive identity, you need to strike on games like this. You know, again, you're going up against a bottom 10 defense in the league, just in the stats on the ground game and the pass game for the Giants. They've been terrible, the defensive side of the ball for them. The Broncos need to strike when the metal's hot, need to get out there. Bo Nix can have a great game and finally get that sense of confidence back in his offensive group.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I think that when you're looking at the way that this offense has kind of molded and grown and progressed over the course of 6 weeks, it has been a situation where we expected it to start off shooting out of a cannon. We expected it to carry over from the quarterback and the offense that we saw in like weeks 11 through 18 of last season, where Bo Nix was on a Rookie of the Year campaign tear and looked like a completely different quarterback from his first 4 games of the season. But really, it kind of felt like we restarted. And that was a result of, I think, so many moving parts in the offense. You bring in 2 new running backs to completely revamp your running back room. You bring in Evan Ingram to be your quote-unquote joker. You have continued development of wide receivers like Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin. You add Pat Bryant to that equation. You subtract Devon Vele in training camp, which was kind of a, or just after training camp, which was kind of a shakeup that I don't think a lot of us saw coming. And so I just feel like there were so many new moving parts on this car that when Bo Nix got in the driver's seat to try to drive it, it didn't feel the same that it was before. And we've seen it start to smooth out in moments. But then you have a game like you did against the Jets, and you start to wonder, okay, wait a minute. How are we not progressing week to week and learning these things? Because Sean Payton says after the game, so many things they struggled with. Third down, they were 5 of 15 against the Jets. Penalties, they had 6 penalties for over 50 yards, and they're one of the most penalized teams in the NFL, averaging close to 9 total flags per game. Those are things that Sean Payton has said we are emphasizing and working on during the week, and they're not getting better. So that is where a little bit of anxiety or frustration maybe creeps into the back of my mind to say, it's one thing when you have a performance like they did against the Jets and it gets better the next week. It was an aberration, you move forward. But this Giants game is going to tell us whether or not the Jets game that we saw is an exception or closer to the norm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Vegas has the Broncos as 7-point favorites. That seems high to me. Watching what they've done, I don't feel confident in this team, and I would not be surprised, honestly, if they lose this game. Just seeing what we've seen in the past couple weeks, the first 3 quarters of the Eagles game, the last 3 quarters of the Jets games, I don't feel confident in this team right now, at least. But hopefully they can take this opportunity back at home. First time since the Bengals. Last time we saw them at home, they were blowing the Bengals out. So maybe they can get back in that groove. But really, I don't feel very confident. But now we're going to move on to one of my favorite, sections of the week, and that's Waiver Wire Wednesday. We're going to be taking a little bit of a look around the league, seeing which players we think are going to pop off. And my first player that I have is Jonnu Smith of the Steelers. The tight end there came over from the Dolphins last year, has had a pretty slow start to the season, but taking on the Bengals in prime time Thursday night, this will be a great opportunity for him to go out there and have some great numbers like we saw him have with the Dolphins last season. My second player, Matthew Golden, the Packers wide receiver. Now, as we know, Jaden Reed is still out, but he's going up against the Cardinals, who have the 5th worst pass defense, and he's coming off of 2 great games where he's had 11 targets for 8 receptions. Those are over half of what he's had on the season total. And then Troy Franklin, that's my pick for the Broncos, going up against the 6th worst pass defense in the New York Giants, who have a slightly better run defense. So the Broncos may be airing the ball out a little bit more, at least looking for some secure targets in Troy Franklin. I expect him to be one of Bo's favorite targets this week. Richie, what are your picks for this week?
Well, it's going to be the first opportunity for any of us this season to see my first pick, who may be a little bit of a frustration to fans of the Broncos or fans of certain teams in the AFC West, but that's going to be Rashee Rice, who is coming back from suspension. He is now eligible to play, and I expect him to make an immediate impact on that Chiefs offense, which started out looking like, hey, this team might be falling off. This may have been the year where they start to kind of fall off that cliff, but they've started to, over the last 3 weeks, stack some pretty big wins. The offense has kind of gotten back to how they were early in Patrick Mahomes' career, where they were the ones kind of pacing the team and leading the defense, whereas previous years it's been the defense because of all the changes they've had at the skill positions on offense. But the Chiefs having to rely on the likes of Tyquan Thornhill and Noah Gray and an aging Travis Kelce, who's looking less and less like himself on a week-to-week basis, and I think you see some frustration mounting there with him. Tyquan Thornhill and Juju Smith-Schuster and Noah Gray, go ahead and step aside, because Rashee Rice is going to jump in back into this Chiefs offense as a route runner, a speed guy, and somebody whose hands are going to make significant impacts on the Chiefs starting this Sunday.
Yep.
Secondly, I'm going to stick in the wide receiver room, Sterling Shepard for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are an absolute mash unit right now, especially on offense. No Mike Evans, no Chris Godwin. Emeka Egbuka goes down with a hamstring injury last week. Bucky Irving, doubtful and still unsure about whether he's going to play. So if you're Cade Otton and you're Sterling Shepard, I could have picked either one of those, but we'll go with Sterling. It's going to be a big, big day with a lot of attention from Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
Last one for me is a running back that I actually was kind of hopeful that the Broncos would have drafted, but they did not move up with an opportunity to do so, and that is Browns running back Quinshon Judkins. I think that Quinshon Judkins, even though he missed the early portion of this NFL season, has cemented himself firmly in that backfield there for Cleveland. And if you look at the matchup that they have against them, the team that they're playing against just allowed 2 backup running backs in Rico Dowdle and Kamani Vidal to combine for 370 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Quinshon Judkins has been able to produce as a high-level back when the Browns have been behind in almost every game.
Mm-hmm.
This game, they're actually in a position to lead and are a favorite. So if that's what Quinshon Judkins can do when they're behind as a pass catcher and as a runner, I am almost salivating to see what he can do when they have a lead and are dictating and controlling the pace of the game.
I like that pick a lot because, I mean, what we've seen from Dylan Gabriel, they might want to keep the ball on the ground. I like that pick a lot, but that'll do it for today's episode of From the Nosebleeds. Thank you guys so much for joining. Of course, we're getting closer and closer every day to this matchup on Sunday, and we're also getting closer and closer to the beginning of the Nuggets season. That's happening next week, I believe a week from tomorrow, right? Thursday, next week, Thursday?
Yes,
yeah, next week, Thursday is the first game of the Nuggets season. So, of course, we're going to be getting into talk like that here soon, but we will see you guys all tomorrow. Until then, y'all have a great rest of your day. Bye, y'all.